So we're going to talk about three ideas here. First, in their theoretical context, and then more importantly, kind of how they work in the real world. So the three of them are self-management, which is a coaching concept, transference, and projection, both of which are more clinically oriented ideas. So fairly quickly, what's self-management? Well, let's say I'm listening to an experience a client has at work, and because I've got 30 plus years of corporate experience, I have a reaction to it. All of a sudden, I think, first of all, I think I know what it is. And second of all, maybe I'm more outraged by the situation than the client is. Okay, well, so I have to notice that because what's happened is I've stopped listening. And that's the concept of self-management. I will bookmark that. I will notice that comes up in myself. And the way I get back into the curiosity about what the client's experience is I start asking questions. Pretty simple, straightforward, very useful. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, why? Why would I, in this case, have that kind of reaction? And that gets us into these two other ideas. One is transference. Well, what is that? That is when someone takes the experience of a primary relationship from their childhood usually and transfers it onto someone else. So in the clinical setting, it's the patient and the therapist. The patient transfers the idea, let's say, of the father onto the therapist. And there's all kinds of theory and technique and methodology of what you do with that. And then there's also the idea of countertransference, where the therapist gets emotionally entangled with the client or the patient, and we're not going to go there today. But transference being that you are taking an experience with someone else that was seminal in your growth and putting it on another person. Projection is when you take an emotion, or more importantly in my work, an ability, a talent, and you say, that's not me, that's them. And you give it to them, okay? And usually you give it to someone where it's reasonable, like you give competence to someone who is actually competent, and you deny it in yourself, okay? So as a working definition, there we have self-management, transference, and projection. Okay, so let's pull the lens back and let's say, well, what does this mean in the real world, walking around every day like we all do? Well, there are approximately 7.7 billion human beings on the planet at this point in time. And essentially what that means is that each one of us has a particular slice of reality pie, okay? And that's influenced by genetics and ethnicity and geography and relationships and all kinds of stuff that's completely impossible to track. But suffice it to say, each one of those 7.7 billion people, me included, has a way of seeing the world. And as we walk through the world, we make sense of it within the confines of that perception. The differences among us is the level of awareness that we have that we do that, okay? So in a funny way, I have taken the easy way of dealing with that. How so? Well, I work with dreams. So a client comes to me with a dream, and neither one of us, hopefully, I'll give you an example to the contrary in a minute, but neither one of us really understands what the heck the message of this is. Instead, we start to work the dream. Now, in the work that I do, the context for understanding the message of that dream is the person's current life, okay? So that's the dynamic between what we call day school and night school. But the point of this is that both of us have to enter into a level of vulnerability. We don't know, okay? Either one of us. And more importantly, I don't know, okay? So I need to ask a lot of questions. And time on the planet helps because I'm used to not knowing. And the thing that really drives that for me, that vulnerability, is the astonishing power that comes up in that client to say, oh, whoa, now I get this. Now I see this. Okay? It's incredible. And it only works if both of us enter into the process not knowing. Now, that's tough to do. And I'll tell you why it's tough to do. Because when you have a dream, when I have a dream, the first thing we want to do is make sense. And there are times that people have brought dreams, usually in classes and sometimes early on in the work, where they will have an idea, okay, I had this dream because I know so-and-so, or my relation, somebody in my family is going through this particular thing and they're in my dream and it's about them, and boom, that's what it is. Now, it's not my dream. And I would be the last person to disagree with that. The only thing I suggest is that there's an and. Yes, and. Why? Because the only way we begin to get a perspective and we begin to become aware of this bias that we have is by telling our story to someone else. And the story in a dream is a unique story. It's only going to get told once this way, even if it's a repetitive dream. They're all a little bit different. They all occurred at a different point in time. So when you tell that story, first of all, you open up your own vulnerability. And second of all, you begin to create through the conversation a dimension to it that you weren't aware of. It's not a lack in anybody. People come to me and say, well, can I learn how to do this on my own? Well, yeah, you can learn some ideas. You can use things like active imagination. You can get more information out of a dream. That's true, you can. But the real work for all of us is in our interactions with other human beings. So that's how it really works. That's how you can't be vulnerable by yourself. I love that Brene Brown anecdote where she talks about a guy who comes up and says, yeah, he's gonna do this vulnerability thing. He's gonna do it on his own for a while. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's the nature of being human is that we interact with each other. And Harry Stack Sullivan said years ago, you are as human as your human interactions with other people. So the idea here really is that you will never do away with your transference and your projection. You will never not have to do self-management. It's your level of awareness of that it exists within you, and that you know what I refer to sometimes as what your instrument is. And that self-awareness allows you to really enter into a story with another human being in a way that allows both of you to be surprised. That's the key. You have to let yourself be surprised. That's tough because most of the time you think you know what you're doing, and it's useful to think you know what you're doing because you got to work in the world, right? But you got to be able to be surprised. So I hope this was useful to you. I hope you have surprising days, and take care of yourselves.